a lot of Welcome to the Art of Conscious Living TV. I'm so very pleased today to have a wonderful gentleman, Devon Gaster. He has a program that he works with called Men Creating Peace. It's a very important program, very timely. With the jails, they're letting out so many people, early release, and so much more going on with our conditions across the United States. He is working with individual men to bring harmony, peace, of creating a more of a loving, beautiful world. Welcome to the show, Devon. How are you today?
Good, thank you, Victoria.
So let's go into when the program first started and who was the founder.
So I founded the program about 7 years ago in Oakland. I had been doing this work for about 10 years at that point, and there wasn't anything like this in Alameda County, so we decided to start it over there. And at first, I got a lot of opposition to starting another violence prevention program in Alameda County, and after a while, once we became established, I started getting more referrals. Then we got more support from the local community and started teaching our classes more regularly.
And what is the methodology that you use, and is it different than the other programs that are out there?
I think it is. We use the curriculum, the manalive curriculum, which was established here in San Rafael at the Marin Abused Women's Services about 35 or 40 years ago. It was one of the first programs to work with and batterers treatment programs here in the state of California. And the curriculum has evolved since then and was brought to San Francisco. I went through the program in 1997 and then trained to become a facilitator in 1998 and started working in the community. And then I started doing classes in jail. And then in 2007, we began the program in Alameda County.
Well, Devon, give me an overview of what it would look like when a gentleman comes to your program and he has got a lot of anger issues and a lot of domestic violence going on.
Well, we start each class with a meditation. So that's one of the first tools we start to teach the men as to how to relax when they get into a moment where they're about to explode or they're about to become violent. They can use that tool. So every class starts with a 5-minute meditation, and then we just start to talk about how the week has been. We go over a few boundaries of the class. The men, that on their first night, they learn that from the other men how many weeks they've been in the program, and then they learn some of the boundaries that we have to keep the place safe in order for us to do the work. And then the men check in about how their week has been. And then when it comes to the first man, his first night, then he's asked to tell his story, how he became either sent to the program or referred to the program. And if he came for an act of violence, we ask him to please share his act of violence. If he can start with how did he start his violence, how did he escalate his violence, and how did he end this violence. And that's all we need to know. We don't judge him. We don't. It's not a way of shaming him or making him feel guilty. We really welcome him and help him to understand that everyone in the room, including myself, the facilitator, or any of our other facilitators, have been in that first week and know what it's like to sit in that chair and how sometimes it can be really nervous and really anxiety-provoking to come and share your story with a group of men you don't even know.
Yeah. Well, it's about being very vulnerable.
Yeah, it's
about
a lot
of people
about
have
that.
not been in that place.
Absolutely.
At times, so it's a lot of nervousness about being so exposed.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of resistance. A lot of men don't want to tell their true story, and sometimes it takes several weeks before they get to that point, before they really open up and feel trust, and enough courage to really tell their story. And part of what we do in the class is to keep it safe and to help the men understand that they're in a safe environment to talk about whatever they want to talk about and learn as many tools as they can to help them change their behavior if that's what they want.
Is it modeled after the 12-step program for AA?
No, it's not. it's not. We don't
So-
use an AA class model, but we do.
Is there any similarity that there's no crosstalk?
Well,
People are sharing.
that's what we talk about in the boundaries. Like we go over the boundaries of the class in the very beginning of no crosstalk is one of the things we ask. Confidentiality, we ask that they don't share any of the other men's stories outside. We also ask if they see another participant outside at a movie theater or, excuse me, at a restaurant or out in the street, that they don't out them, that they don't tell the other person, you know, oh, hey, how's it going, you know, that they leave that anonymous. We do encourage people to share what they learn in the class, and we encourage them to use the tools in their everyday life, and also invite them to bring a guest if they like another male guest. If they have someone in their family or some friend or coworker that's having issues with his anger or his violence, then we invite them to bring the guest. The first class is always free. There's never a charge for the first class, and there's never any pressure for the man to join the class. We let them see what the whole class is about, and at the end of the class we ask them if they would like to join the class. And if they would like to join the class, then we ask them to make some agreements with the group. We believe that agreements are the currency of a healthy relationship, and so they begin that process in making the agreements with the other men in the group. And one of the agreements is that I agree I'm violent to myself and others, and the second agreement is that I agree I'm willing to stop my violence to myself and others. And then there are other agreements around being clean and sober, 12 hours before they come to the group, 12 hours after they come to the group, not bringing any weapons to the group, and things like that.
So from your vantage point of being a facilitator and looking at so many different people over the years, at what point in time do you usually see that people start to relax into it and start to trust it and start to get results, favorable results?
That's a hard question. I think that for every man, it's a little different. You know,
It's
some
an
men,
individual
absolutely.
call, but yet, is there a 3 mark, a 3 month, or around the 6th month you start seeing people really opening up usually?
Again, every man is different. We do ask the men to go through a process called a first step exercise or first stage exercise after they've been in the program for about 15 weeks. And we ask them to retell their story, the same story they told us on the first night. We ask them to retell that story. And then we have the men in the group ask some questions about their disclosure. And we have a board, and we put the diagram of the class up on the board. And the men go through that board and put all the information that the man sitting in the chair is telling. And usually that's a good gauge or a good test as far as where they are, as far as their accountability, where their comfort is, and as far as telling their story again. And then once they advance onto the second stage of the program, when they first start that class, we ask them to tell their story again. And as a facilitator, we get to sort of model or find out where they are in their accountability, where they are in their trustworthiness as far as, you know, how they trust the group. A lot of the men they already know and they are already established a trust relationship with, so they feel a little more comfortable opening up in the second stage. And then at the end of second stage, before they can advance to third stage, we ask them to tell their story again. And there's a different set of questions that the men in the group ask the man that's doing the exercise. And it all has to do with a very different focus. Second stage is very different focus than first stage. First stage focuses primarily on the violence and understanding where the man started his violence, where he learned to be violent, some of the attitudes that he has as far as entitlement is concerned, and expectations that he has on other people and himself. And the second stage is very focused on learning about your true self and getting in touch with your emotions, learning to express yourself differently, learning how to negotiate boundaries, learning how to soften and to relax, advancing more with that relaxation process that we start in the very beginning with the meditation. Now we have a different exercise where the men breathe and start to really relax and get calm and get in touch with their emotions. The third stage is more in touch with creating fulfillment. Now that you're getting towards the end of the program, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do differently now? How are you going to care for yourself and not get caught back up into an unhealthy relationship or a codependent relationship? What do you do to take care of yourself now? And this is also a time where we encourage the men to think about going into 12-step or thinking about going into parenting classes or another type of therapy or counseling process. If the man has a drinking problem or the man has a drug problem, from the very beginning we ask them to start going to AA or NA classes. And in fact, we'll ask them to bring a sign-in sheet to show and demonstrate that they're going.
Again, these 3 stages, how long do you think, generally speaking, it would take to go through them? Some people are going to progress faster, some easier, but generally speaking.
Generally, we keep it, the program is a 52-week program. So we break it into 20 weeks for the first stage, and then 16 weeks of the second stage, and then 16 weeks for the third stage.
And what success stories have you seen that really stand out?
That's a good question. I've seen a number of men come back to the class and share with the group, actually share with the group as a graduate. I just wanted to come back and tell you guys, this changed my life, this has helped me in my relationships with my children. I've had men come back and give testimonials to the group about what they gained from the program, how it's helped them in their work life, how it's helped them in their family life. Some of the men have been able to heal their relationships with their partner that they had the violent incident with. Some men have not. Some men have had to move on to a different relationship or work on something else. So I guess the way that I measure it is if I see someone on the street or if I get a phone call from someone like 2 years later and they share with me, you know, I just want to tell you that I'm doing really well. I'm in a new relationship. I'm happy. I'm getting to see my children again. I've got a new job, you know, I'm not having those angry outbursts any longer. If I do, I know how to, you know, work with them, and I use the tools from the program to help me calm down. One time I was going to a concert, and I had one of my former participants come up to me in the line of the concert, and he was with his partner and introduced himself to me and my partner at the time, and just wanted to tell his partner, this is the guy that, you know, helped me go through the classes, and she thanked me. She, you know, shook my hand and thanked me and said, you know, he's a totally different man since he went through the program. And so that's when I really feel like that success, you know, knowing that I had a part in that man's healing process. What
factors do you think contribute to the ongoing chaos in the gentlemen's lives? For instance, it would be anger, would be one, clothing shutting down, being numbed up. What other factors would be?
Well, those are some of the main factors, and the reasons behind people shutting down or closing up or numbing is pain. And there's usually a lot of pain.
Yeah, and
that
anger.
Behind the anger, there's pain, there's hurt, there's sadness, there's fear. And men are not able to express those emotions. They've never been taught to express those emotions. I think one of the things that I got out of the program was to look behind the anger. What's driving the anger? It's usually someplace that I'm sad about or I hurt about, there's a loss, or I'm afraid. I'm afraid and I don't know how to talk about that fear. And what we encourage the men to do is to look behind the anger, to deal with those emotions and express those to whoever you're having the issue with, whether it be a boss or whether it be a coworker, whether that be your partner or your child or another family member. You know, what's causing that? And then talk about that and deal with that if you can. And we also tell the men that the program doesn't work. It doesn't work. This 52-week program does not work. It's not going to stop your violence. You have to stop your own violence. You have to use the tools every day, and you have to make a conscious decision every day to stop your violence, moment by moment, whenever things come up. And if you feel yourself getting angry, what are those triggers? What are the signs in your body that are telling you, you know, my blood pressure's going up, I may get hot, my face may turn red, I may start to shake, I may start to stutter, I may start to cry. So those are big red flags. What do I do? How do I pump my brakes a little bit and take a time out, back off, breathe, and find a way to calm myself down before I proceed with the conversation or whatever the upset is? And I think that's part of it. A lot of what causes the upset is that men have a hard time talking about that pain, that fear.
Well, it's the culture.
It is the culture,
from
yeah.
The different decades were more
Absolutely.
so that. Perhaps in the 50s, it was the John Wayne period of bite down, and a man's a man, and not to show their emotions, and don't just show their vulnerability because that equals to weakness.
Absolutely.
So they had to keep it all inside. But now there's a certain time is different now. So it's finding the balance between the two of them. You don't want somebody who's crying all the time, and being too vulnerable and too, but you want somebody who's there in the middle of it, when they know how to turn it on and how to lean into it and maybe not expose it as much as they could be exposing it.
Well, you're right about the balance, trying to find a balance and knowing, the style and timing. Some people I can talk about my feelings with, and I can talk about what's really going on for me, and some people I cannot. So it's learning to find that balance and to understand that I'm not going to change anyone else. The only person I can change is myself and how I respond to what comes at me. It may be from a boss. It may be from a neighbor. It could be somebody that I'm involved in an automobile accident with. How do I approach that person after that person? I may have caused the accident, and that person may be coming at me in a real hostile way. How do I respond to that without matching their energy, without getting in their face and starting to escalate whatever's happening in the moment?
And what
How do
would
I
be the
de-escalate?
ideal of that?
Calm down, lower your voice,
Your
validate your attitude.
100% of more of a positive attitude instead of coming off as a total aggressor, negative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Breathe into it. Bring the positive into it.
Or ask questions. What can I do to help? Or what can I do to make this different? Or, owning. A big part of it is accountability. A big part of the program is accountability. Owning it. Okay, it was my mistake. I didn't see you there. Please, are you okay? Is there anything I can do? Can we exchange, the information as far as our insurance companies are concerned, our phone numbers, those type of things. Instead of getting agitated and up in someone's face, how do I de-escalate that situation?
So what would you say to those who are listening to us and they are completely, really hardened and really got an incredible bad attitude? And if you're in their face, they're going to take you down. They're going to come to a fist fight, right away, because that's their mentality and that's their way of being. And that's what they know, and they're looking and hearing us right now speaking and saying, well, that's ridiculous, what they're talking about, what we're speaking about here. They are basically want to use blunt force, muscle, and aggression, and that's their way. I would say to that, what kind of life is that giving you? Is that, if you had peace in your life, would you have something better? Would you know something better? How would that improve your life? What would you add to that?
Well, first I'd ask them, how's that working for you? How's that aggressive stance? How's that macho attitude? How's that working for you? Is that bringing people closer to you, or is that pushing people farther away from you?
But his attitude's going to say, it's working for me.
And
numbness.
And we want to validate that. We want to say, okay, great. Okay, so let's talk about the impact of that in your life. What's happening? How many times have you had to switch jobs over the last 5 years? Have you ever been arrested for that? How many relationships have you gone through over the last 5 to 10 years?
Do you have loving, intimate relationships?
How are you with your children? Do you have children? How are you with your other family members? What happens for you? How do you relax? What are some of the ways that you take care of yourself? And these are the questions we put back on them. It's like playing tennis, right? Yeah. It's sending the ball back over the net to them and say, okay, so that's how you are and that's working for you, but let's talk about some other possible negative impacts that behavior is having for you. How's your stress level? How's your health? Because all these things have an impact on us.
Yes. Let's discuss about having children. And if they have children, a lot of times they're going to try to bring the fear into the children, where the children are afraid of them and they're dominating, and because of the aggression, so therefore they think they should keep them in line in that way. There has to be another way, of course. Oh. So the ideal way would be to bring compassion, to bring positiveness there, to bring a connection there.
Mm-hmm. Well,
a loving connection.
A lot of that is about learning to treat others as equal. Mm-hmm. Instead of coming at your child as from a place of superiority and the other, and putting them in a place of inferiority. How do I treat my child as my equal? I know that they're not my equal because I'm older and probably stronger and bigger and more experienced. But how can I get to their level so that they're not afraid of me, so that they're not complying with my requests because they're afraid? How do I work with them and negotiate with them? Sometimes I have to set a very clear boundary with my children. I have to say, look, if you continue this, then these are the consequences. And be very clear, not back down, not be wishy-washy about it.
Yes.
But I don't have to hit my children. I don't have to yell at my children. I don't have to threaten my children. And that's what I share with the men. And a lot of men come in and they say, oh, you got to spank your child, or you have to be strong with your child, because that's what's wrong with America right now, is because kids don't get spanked. And, you know, if I touch my child, they'll go to CPS, or they can go to their school principal and tell them that I beat them, and then I'm going to jail. And it's there for a reason. You know, the laws have changed to protect children because for so many years, you know, parents have hurt their children. And we're asking them to see it in a different way. And it's not about being a pushover. It's not about allowing your child to run over you. It's about, how do I set clear boundaries without being violent and without being scary and having my child be afraid of me.
Yes, and ideally, how do you help the child to be self-reliant
Absolutely.
and responsible?
Yeah.
And by doing that, it's about fostering love and sharing that love with them. But of course, if one doesn't know that, from one generation to another, they're passing the same gauntlet on to the next generation of fear and aggression. So it's about owning up to all of that and seeing that there's a new way of being and trying it and seeing the results and verifying it for yourself.
And it's about inviting the men to make a difference, to change what was taught to them. Break the cycle of the violence that was done to you and taught to you in your children's lives. It stops with you right now. And inviting them to participate in that, inviting them to say, one of the questions we ask the men is, would you want your daughter to grow up and marry a man like you? And overwhelmingly, the men say, no, I wouldn't. And so how do you begin that process? How do you start to educate your daughter? How do you start to treat your daughter differently and help her to empower herself and to be assured of herself and to know the difference between what's a healthy relationship, what's an unhealthy relationship? How do you create a space where your daughter or your son feels comfortable to come to you and talk to you about a real problem? If they're pregnant, or if they have done something where they've broken the law, or they've started abusing drugs, how do you create a space where it's safe for them to come and talk to you about that, instead of, you know, just crushing them if they've made a mistake? A lot of it is modeling that behavior and admitting when you've made a mistake or admitting when you're wrong.
That's very powerful.
And being able to apologize to your child.
Yes, where you turned it into personalizing it when you asked them about their daughter, would they like to marry a man like them? And now it polarizes it for them to really owe up and take responsibility instead of looking at it in an abstract way.
Yeah. And a lot of times
Very
that's where
powerful.
we get them. You know, we ask them to come out of their head and come back to their heart, you know, and to start to feel and instead of thinking all the time, start to feel. What's the feeling you have when you talk about your daughter? What do you feel? I feel love. I feel afraid. You know, I feel sad because I can't see her right now. You know, so how can we change that? How can we work on that? How can we improve that? How can we heal that? You know, what can you do to heal that? And a lot of times men, when they start to think of their children, that's when we get them to touch their heart. Not their ex-partner, not their girlfriend, not the person they were in the relationship with, not the coworker that they got in a fight with. It's talking about their children, because that's really where they feel a lot of love and a lot of passion. And sometimes that's where they begin their change. I talked to a man I work in jail with just recently, and his little 4-year-old son was visiting him on visiting day. And they're between glass. And his little son said, "Daddy, I just want to hug you." And he started to cry. And the man had to end the visit. He couldn't take it. And he came to group the next day and talked about that experience and just openly cried with the group and talked about how emotional that was for him and how he made a vow to the group that day that he was going to do everything in his power to stay out of jail and to get back in his son's life.
Was that the first time that he had that kind of emotional experience with his son?
I don't know.
No.
I don't know. But that was the first time he'd shared it in our group about that.
All right. What about crying and men in tears? The thinking is that it it's showing weakness, where it's totally the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
When you connect to your tears and connecting to your emotions, you're actually victorious with it. You're stronger. But people are equating that with weakness.
Mm-hmm.
So let's discuss that.
Well, that's an early childhood teaching. We call it the male role belief system, where you're taught at a very early age as a man to man up, to be a man. And big boys don't cry. That's one of the first lessons we get taught. Or big boys don't wet their bed.
And what are they supposed to do if they're not crying and they're feeling young boys and they're feeling all this pain?
It's okay to cry. Everyone cries. It's healthy to cry.
Natural.
It's natural.
It's
Everyone
normal.
cries. And in the program, one of the things that we talk about is the emotions. We have definitions for the emotions. So we have 8 specific emotions that the men learn how to express themselves through those 8 emotions. And the emotion of sadness, we talk about it as hurt healing. Sadness is hurt healing. Your hurt is healing. And part of healing is grieving. Part of grieving is crying and letting that release of energy go. When you cry, it releases so much tension in your body. Your tear ducts are actually healing. You're actually emoting and letting go of so much. A Native American told me once, who was one of my students, he said, tears are the words that we can't speak. And I thought that was very powerful. So how do I let go? How do I allow myself to just let whatever is going on for me release? And we hold that safe space, and the men allow them to cry. Many times they don't cry in the first stage, but at the second and third stage, they go much deeper, and they feel safe to cry in front of other men because there's no judgment. There's no, oh, you're bad, or you're weak, or you're less than. You're okay.
Tears connect you to your emotions.
Yeah.
Your emotions are your true essence of what is real for you, what is loving,
Mm-hmm.
what is good within you, the goodness within you.
Yeah.
If you're coming not from your tears, not this place of vulnerability, you're coming from this place of head, place of ego,
Right.
a place of disconnect, a place of separation.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting you use that word separation, because the definition of anger is separating from my hurt or my fear that I've decided won't go away. So they separate from that fear or that hurt, and then they become angry. And what we've learned throughout most men have learned throughout their lives is when you get angry, you get aggressive. When you get angry, you express that anger through aggression or violence in order to get what you want, in order to not feel the hurt anymore, to push people away, to not feel afraid any longer. Many times it's a fight or flight or freeze response that we have because we feel so much like something terrible is going to happen to us. Our ego is going to be challenged, or we're going to be embarrassed or shamed. Somebody's going to see us as less than. And so we get angry and aggressive in order to maintain that superiority, to pump ourselves up. We call it the hitman. It's an image that we try to portray as men of being on top of it, and having it all together. There's 5 words that we use to provide. A man has to provide, he has to protect, he has to produce, he has to perform, and he has to be perfect. And if he can't measure up to those things, then he's not a man, or he's less than a man. And what I do in my classes is I ask the men to say, how many times have you not measured up to performing, or producing, or protecting, or being perfect, or being in a performance where you couldn't do well? So every one of them say, there's been times when I couldn't. It's like, okay, that's not real. It's false. You're living up to a false image. You're trying to maintain this false image, and it's either going to get you dead, or in jail, or alone.
Or bring a lot of hurt on.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So do you want that in your life? And again, I invite them to think about that. Do you want that in your life? Do you want to go back to jail? Do you want to get killed? Do you want to kill somebody else? Do you want to be alone for the rest of your life? Because no one's going to want to be around that hitman, that image that you portray. So let's talk about who you really are. And let's talk about how you can stay in that part of you, become that authentic self, and let that hitman side of you, that violent image side of you go. It's not serving you. It may serve you in a moment of when your life is threatened, like if if someone's trying to rob you or rob a loved one or break into your home or something like that, then that's different. That's a self-defense situation. But the majority of the time in your life, you're not always having to defend yourself. And it's not, this program isn't about becoming weak or just letting people push you over. It's about empowering yourself to understand that I don't have to use violence in order to get my needs met. That I can communicate, that I can ask for what I need, that if I don't get that, then I can go somewhere else. I can find it within myself, or I can ask for help from other people. That's a big thing that men don't do, is ask for help, because that shows weakness. So how do we now ask for help? And it starts in the classroom. The men ask each other for help. If a man doesn't know the answer to a question, I encourage him, ask your class. Ask the guys for help. Don't be afraid. And they start to begin to do that in the class. And then it starts to build a camaraderie. It starts to build a cohesiveness where the men start to trust each other enough where they can ask for help. And they can be willing to hear feedback from the other men. We don't give advice. We don't judge people. We don't tell people our opinion, and we don't ask contesting questions. We give people feedback based on what we feel and the emotions and what our past experience has been. And we don't have any attachment to the outcome. It's not about making somebody do something you think they should do. It's about saying, look, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm feeling when I heard you say that, and this has been my past experience. Would you be willing to make an agreement with me?
Yes. Devon, I'd like to discuss about relationships between men and women and the ideal relationship. Every decade it shifts ever so slightly. More women are in the working force now, where they have nannies and sitters for the children. They're out there working. The men are working. What's the whole dynamics of what's going on with that? What would be the ideal situation of the way they would be communicating and loving each other?
Compromise, empathy. That seems to be the key.
And what is the glue, the connection that keeps them?
Well, communication is a big part of it, and being able to negotiate, being able to be flexible, being able to understand that my partner may have worked all day and she's tired and she doesn't want to make dinner. So why don't I make dinner, or why don't we go out to dinner, or why don't we just scramble some eggs, and have a real simple dinner.
Right. And on a deeper intimacy level of communicating, what's happening there on the emotional level?
Well, you're not putting so much pressure on the other person to abide by what you think they should do or how they should act or how they should be. You accept them for who they are, really and truly. And you ask them to also accept you for who you are. And if there are issues in the relationship or there are issues with the other person, then you talk about it and you negotiate and you ask for what you need. And sometimes the relationship is not a healthy one. And men have to come to that realization, women have to come to that realization. If that relationship is not working for them and they can't seem to come to an equal balance or a place where there's a harmonious relationship, then they need to end that relationship in a nonviolent way and move on. Not in a way to hurt the other person, but as a way to say, I love you, and it's not working any longer. How do we work together to separate and move on with our lives and still be in connection? Because many times we have children and we can't completely lose that connection. I know from my own experience it was very difficult when I went through my violence and I was separated from my partner. I was not allowed to have any communication with her. And for a time I wasn't able to have any communication with our daughter. And that was very hurtful and very difficult at that time. And I had to go through the steps in order to get communication back with my daughter. And then eventually the court granted me peaceful contact with my ex-partner. And we were able to communicate. And that was very difficult at first. And over the years, it's been 17 years, over the years we've been able to heal a lot of that relationship. And we have a much better communication now, a much better relationship. We can actually go out and have coffee together. She's invited me to her house a number of times. I've invited her into my house for meals. When our daughter graduated from college a few years ago, we sat next to each other at the graduation, and we all went out to dinner as a family. So there's been a lot of healing, and I believe that had to do with letting go of wanting her to change and realizing that I had to change, and accepting her for who she is and just loving her for who she is, and hoping that within time she'll forgive me for some of the things that I did in the relationship.
So this must serve you very well that you've been on both sides of it. You're now the facilitator, and you've also been the person who was on the other side. of the wrongness of it. So you're on the right side of it now. You know what the wrong is. So when you're speaking from a place of authority, from experience. And what you're passing on to others is basically a proven, livable, live thing within you.
Well, I want to say that it's not about right or wrong. It's about just making decisions. I made a decision that did not serve me. It did not serve my family. It did not serve my ex-partner. And it cost me. It had a lot of consequences and a lot of impact. And I made many decisions that didn't serve me in that relationship. And I hurt that relationship. And I hurt my partner and my child and my family. And it's not about coming from a place of authority. It's about coming from a place of experience. I sat in that seat where you're sitting in the first week. I know how it feels. I went through this, and I'm able to tell you that I came out the other side. That if you really use this material that you learn in this program and you put it to use, you can heal a lot of relationships. I can't guarantee anything, but I know from my own experience that I was able to have some healing in my relationship. Are things perfect with my ex-wife and I? No. Then they never probably will be, and I just have to accept that. But they're a lot better than they were 17 years ago. And that's what I want to encourage the men to understand, that right now it may seem like the darkest time in your life, but with time and with practice and with you making a change in your life, things can get better. They did for me, and they can for you. I'm not saying they will, but they can. There's a possibility. So instead of seeing the glass half empty, see it half full and see the potential that you can make in your life if you choose to. It's all about choice, really. And that's what I would say to anyone that's watching this. It's about choice. We have a choice to make, whether we're going to use violence or we're going to be intimate with other people and ourselves.
How much of it do you think, from your own experience, came from your childhood?
A lot.
Your upbringing?
A lot.
Well, let's discuss that.
A lot. Without getting too much into it, it came from a divorced family. Mm-hmm. My parents didn't physically fight a lot, but they argued quite a bit. And there were a lot of loud yelling matches and a lot of staying away, disconnecting. So if we were to look at some of the unhealthy dynamics of relationship, when you asked me a little while ago about what does a healthier relationship look like, or what can a healthy relationship look like today, there are a lot going on. In my family of origin, my father went to work every day, my mother took care of the kids and took care of the home. There's not that dynamic any longer, for the majority of people in the world today, especially here in the United States. There are two people out there working to survive. And so there's got to be a lot of flexibility. There's got to be a lot of understanding and communication.
Right. So how did this fighting in the house, was there alcohol involved?
There wasn't. My parents didn't
drink. There was a lot of chaos. There was a lot of arguing and not communication of... was there any violence?
Yeah, there was violence. There was a lot of hitting with regards to the children, especially myself. I had two sisters. They didn't get hit as much as I did, but I got hit a lot. Okay. I got yelled at a lot. All three of us got yelled at a lot. My mother was very critical, and I think that led to a lot of problems in the relationship. There was a lot of inflexibility. Again, I want to bring back that need to be flexible and to make agreements and to negotiate and be compassionate, empathetic, and understanding of your other partner in the relationship. There wasn't that going on.
So how much of that did you take over into your own life when you grew up, after you became 20? Did you emulate your parents? Did you start arguing with your partners and be combative as your parents, or would you said, no, that's not the way I want to be?
Well, yeah, certainly. I certainly said to myself I didn't want to be like that. And I went into my relationship with my ex-wife thinking that I was very different than my parents.
In reality, you were?
In reality, things started to come back up. The belief system, the things that I was taught. What a man should do and what a man shouldn't do, what a woman should do, what a woman shouldn't do. Those were all sort of in the back of my mind.
And you were taught those not verbally, you were taught them through example of the way the parents were communicating to each other.
Well, no, they were
not
taught...
communication of what they were doing.
They were taught verbally too. They were taught in all different ways. We learned that belief system not only from our parents, but what they tell us, what they do, what we see on TV.
They verbally told you to do certain things?
Well, yeah, for sure.
At that generation, that was like 20, 30 years ago.
So I grew up in a family that was very religious. And my father converted to that religious belief so that he could marry my mother. And I don't think that he was raised in any organized religion. He wasn't, in fact. So it was very different for him, and he went along with it because that's what my mother wanted him to do. And then she raised us in this religious belief, you know, and there was a certain doctrine about that religious belief that this was right and this was wrong. And so when I went away to college and I started taking other classes and understanding that there's a whole bunch of different religions out there, there's a whole bunch of different ways of thinking what's right and what's wrong, or what's good and what's bad, and understanding that everyone is allowed to be who they are and they shouldn't be judged for who we think they should be or who our religion tells us they should be. I started to all away from my faith and go away from that. And as I got into the relationship that I got into, my ex-wife was not into that kind of religion at all. You know, she was in a totally different belief system around religious belief. And so we clashed around that on certain things. Like when our daughter was born, I wanted to have our child baptized. And she at first didn't want that. And then she did acquiesce to that, and she did agree to that. So that was a compromise that we made. And after a while, she didn't want me to take the child to church any longer. I started to go back to a different church, and she was not comfortable with that any longer. And I didn't force her. You know, again, I was remembering that my mom forced me to go to church, and I didn't like it. So I got to that point where I would ask my daughter when she got old enough, "Do you want to go to church with Daddy this Sunday or no?" And she would say no. And over again, she would say no, and I would just let that go. And so my child has grown up, and she's not in an organized religion, and that's okay. And I've allowed her to be that way. Occasionally, she'll come to church with me if she wants to. I've now gotten back into my faith. But I also realize that I don't want to judge others if they're not in that same faith or same belief. So that was a big one, I think. The way that my mother would talk to us, very critical. I still struggle with that in my new relationship now. I've been with my partner now for 13 years, and I still struggle with that. I still struggle with that with my coworkers.
Critical from the way of
critical, just judgmental.
Are you amounting to? Are you adding up? Are you good enough? Are you?
Yeah, that and holding stamps. You know, carrying resentments, not doing it in the time manner that I think it should be done, and then understanding that okay. My other partner is free to do what she wants when she wants to do it. And if I don't like that, then I can either do it myself or find some other solution to the matter. And that's something I struggle with. And
were both your parents equally on the same level of being of the chaos, or was one more loving and benevolent?
There was a lot of different causes to that chaos. Religion was just one part of it. My father was a workaholic, worked all the time. And he came from a very, very poor background, and he didn't ever want to be poor again. And so he rose to a very high level of income by working as hard as he did. So a lot of the chaos was around him working so much and being gone so much of the time.
And then being tired when he got home and not being able to be present with the family.
Well, yes, and wanting to, you know, have his dinner made for him and ready, and being having a little time with us, but then
and focusing totally on getting back to work the next day.
Or that night. A lot of times he would come home, he would have dinner with us and go right back to work in the evening in his desk at home. He had a home office, and he would read or do work.
And how did that feel as a child? Did you felt that you weren't getting the attention or more quality time with your father? And
I just thought that was how...
That's the way it is.
That's the way it is, you know, until I actually got to see other parents and other family dynamics. I just thought, well, that's how it is, you know, and my mom being as critical as she was, I was like, well, that's how it is.
Looking back at that in hindsight, now that you're an adult now, how do you think that really shaped you? That you grew up with a father as such that wasn't as much available to you as he could have been, and a mother who's critical. Basically, what is the downside? How did that make you?
It made me become much more inward, much more secretive and quiet into myself, and not willing to tell the truth, not willing to be really honest about things.
And not be as vulnerable as you could
Not
be.
be vulnerable.
Don't show up and show all your inner stuff that's going on, all of the things that maybe you are hesitant about or not sure about. Don't expose that. Just kind of be more, show the tough side of you and don't show the other side. So that formulated all of that as a child.
Part of it did, yeah, absolutely. Part of it did. And I also started experimenting with drugs because there was a lot of pain that I didn't know how to express or didn't know how to talk about.
And the
so I
drugs
numbed
is
it.
Part of the numbing part.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Numbing it.
Numbing it.
So
don't feel it.
Don't feel
own
it. And I think that caused a lot of friction in my family, you know, because I was under the influence a lot. And so I was checked out, and I didn't communicate to my family members what I was going through or what the pain I was suffering with or dealing with. And that just came with understanding and time and therapy, a lot of therapy over the years of my life, and understanding, you know, that there were certain behaviors that I learned that didn't work for me, and one of them was numbing, you know, using drugs and alcohol to numb. That doesn't work for me. That just disconnects me from myself. And I don't have a clear head, and I don't have a clear connection with what I want to say or want to see as far as an outcome is concerned.
Right. There must be a certain point of time after all the therapy and after breathing into it and owning all of it, that there was a pivotal moment in time where you say, this feels right now. This feels so different than before. And I just want more of this, of the goodness of it.
You want me to tell you when that was?
Yes. Well, when and how much of the time of looking at it from before and after, of what it was like, actually.
Well, I think it's still a process, you know. I don't think
it's definitely a process.
Yeah, I'm still in that process.
There's still this moment in time where you say, well, this is way better than it used to be. Now I'm feeling I can own this. I'm liking the results. And there's a recognition of that. When was that moment in time?
It's probably after I finished my 52-week program, and I started to do some public speaking and started to tell people my story and became really honest about what I had done and the harm that I had caused and the pain that I had caused, and starting to really be accountable for it, and then making decisions not to do that again, not to do some of the same behaviors that I had done in my relationship as I got into new relationships, being very honest with the person, you know, also having a place of being accepting of that person and not trying to push my agenda. And got to a point where I could look myself in the mirror and say, you know, I really like who I am or who I'm becoming now. I feel that I'm living my life in integrity. And that was a big one, you know, because most of my life I haven't lived in integrity, or a big part of it, not most of it, but a big part of it, I hadn't told the truth because there was always a side of me that I didn't want to talk about. And so I kept that hidden from people.
So it's about showing what you think people would want to see.
No,
but
not so much.
What was the integrity part?
Really just being who I am, and this is who I am, and this is...
But no, before.
Before, oh yeah, of course.
When you're not living in integrity, what were you doing?
Well, you were showing a side of who I thought people thought, or who I thought people wanted to see in me, an image. You know, when we go back to the hitman, I was living in my hitman. I was living in this image I thought I needed to be, you know, showing. And I wanted acceptance. I wanted approval. And I thought if I stayed in this image that people would love me and approve me. And as I got farther away from understanding that that's not working for me, that image isn't working for me, that's a false side of me, and I just became who I was, or who I really am truly, I saw a big difference in how people saw me and how people interacted with me. And the people that stayed in my life were the really quality people that I wanted to have in my life. The people that didn't stay in my life were the people that really weren't meant to be in my life.
What would be the Parliament most important differences of then and living your life today with this integrity and this newfound energy and acceptance? What would be the one main part of it?
Well, I have a lot less shame and guilt.
Yes?
I live with a lot less worry that somebody's going to see me for who I am.
Yeah, less stress.
Yeah, because this is who I am. Yeah.
There's more ease, there's more flow, there's more simplicity to it now.
Sort of. Yeah, I mean, I cause a lot of stress in my life by trying to do too many things, and I think that's something that I need to continue to work on, is finding a balance in my life. I work way too much, and that's very similar to what I saw my father do, so that's another part of learning how to relax. You know, doing the meditation has helped me tremendously to learn how to relax, exercising. Just not putting so much pressure on other people to conform and to be who I think they should be. You know, that's been a big part of it. Even in this work, when I first started doing this work, I wanted things to be so in my class. You know, I wanted people to be different, you know, and I want them to change, and I want them to do different and be better, and don't go back to jail, and don't violate your restraining order. And I had to get to a point of acceptance and understanding that people are just going to be who they are. And I can share what I have turned, you know, how I've turned around and how I've changed my life, and they're either going to pick up something or they're not. And I can't be invested in the outcome.
And they're in their own time and their own process.
Own time and own process,
so
just as I am.
Essentially, the best we can do is to inspire them.
Yeah.
And guide them, but inspire.
Yeah, and not be attached to the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just to be to be positive and to help them when I can, and to be accepting and forgiving.
Yes.
And let them know that everybody makes decisions that don't serve them. It's okay. You're human.
In closing, we just have a few moments left. What is the most important thing that you'd like to share to others to give them some help and some guidance?
I would say part of it is to forgive what happened to you, you know, if you can. Many of us are walking around with a lot of pain, a lot of trauma that we've suffered, and we take that out on other people. You know, the old saying, hurt people hurt people. So how do I begin that process of healing myself? Well, part of it is letting go of that, you know, that resentment or that hatred or that rage that I feel towards people that may have hurt me. And to stop hurting yourself, you know, that's a big part of it. To be kinder and more gentle and more forgiving to yourself and to others around you. That's really, in essence, what I want for my life.
Yes, and I'd like to add to that, if they are in pain and they're hurting, do they need punishment, or is that a cry for help, actually? And I believe it's a cry for help. So don't punish them, help them.
Yeah. Yeah, give them alternatives. Allow them to help themselves if they want to. And certainly there are consequences to people that don't decide to change, or that they want to continue to be violent. There's going to be consequences. They're going to wind up dead or in jail or very lonely. And that's unfortunate. But yeah, punishment is not the end all. It's not the way to motivate people to change. You know, the way to motivate people to change is to educate them and empower them, and to allow them to make their own choices.
Well, thank you. It was a great pleasure to meet you and speak with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for all your great work and benefits you do for so many others. Thank you. And from the Art of Conscious Living, do take care of yourselves and take care of others.